Okay, today we're back to work on the Avanti. It's in the garage and we've got a lot of work to do, and I think I'm starting off with the starter solenoid. You just can't turn the key and get this thing to crank, and the contacts where the wiring connects in the starter solenoid is really rusty, so I'm just going to put another one on. So I went back to my parts bin and found a decent one. And I'll put this on, and here's where that goes in the car. We're under the hood, and if you can just see that down in there. So I've got to do a little bit of digging to get at it, but shouldn't be too bad. We'll get that changed out. Hopefully that'll allow us to crank the engine over when we want to. And then after that, we're going to start going after the fueling, which fuel system seems to have some crud in it. And we'll go after the thermostat because this was running hot. I think the thermostat's stuck. So obviously a pretty tight engine bay, but we'll get at it. So we'll start with the starter solenoid. With a little bit of work, I got the starter solenoid off. And you can see this thing is pretty cruddy. It's been in there for a while. I think the big problem, this is the post right here that kicks on the starter, and the wiring on it just slides right off, and look at all that corrosion on there. That thing is pretty far gone. So anyway, even if it does kick over and the solenoid clicks, we're still not getting juice down to the starter. So with this one, you can see it's a much cleaner piece. We'll get that in there and see if we hit the key, things start up as they should. So we'll put that one back in. So I've just finished getting that new solenoid in. That's this piece right there. I've cleaned up all the wiring connectors, getting everything looking really good. And so you can see it. It's really hard to get at, but it's right down there. You can just see one of the posts. So we're going to see if this thing works. We're going to hook up the battery. We're not going to start the car, but we're just going to hit the key, and if it works, the engine will crank. Because before we would just get nothing or a click. So all we're hoping for is a crank. Here we go. Working first time every time. So one problem fixed. Now we're going to move on to more difficult things. That way we now know we can crank the engine. And what we're going to do is take the surge tank off next. And to get the surge tank off, because this is just a fun little design, we have to get the alternator bracket off, because that covers the surge tank bolts. To get the alternator bracket off, you can see a bolt right down here is hitting a water pipe. So all kinds of fun things. I'm going to have to get the belt off the alternator, get that out of the way so I can get that bolt out, so I can get that bracket off, so I can get the surge tank off. So next step, we'll see how far we get. So I loosened the adjuster, brought the alternator back as far as it would go, and now I've been able to flip the alternator belt off. And with that, I can now pull this up, and now I can get the second bolt off, because otherwise it would hit that pipe. So we get these guys off. There's one. Now I can really wing this thing forward. Now I can finally get at this one. Yeah, I can get at that one. So with that, I'll get this alternator bracket off, because that's attached down low to the surge tank. And that's going to be a fun one to get at. It's on the other side of the surge tank. So that's what our next step is. So reached under the surge tank, got that bolt out. So now this bracket comes loose. So that bracket goes onto the surge tank. So I've got that off. Now I want to pull the surge tank, but I've still got some fluid in there. Maybe not. It looks like it's dripped out. So we'll go ahead and pull the surge tank. That way we can get at the thermostat, because we know the thermostat wasn't working. And that'll give us a little more space to get the power steering pump off. Got the surge tank off. And now we got to get the thermostat out. So it's right here, and I've already scraped on a little bit. So there's the thermostat, and we'll be replacing this. So I think this is part of the problem with this thing running so doggone hot. So we'll get that done. But now we want to get at the fuel pump, and that's under this power steering pump. Now we had to pull the top bolt for the power steering pump to get the surge tank off, because there's a bracket that goes to that. So I'll go for the pivot bolt underneath it and get the belt off, and then hopefully I've got enough hose that I can swing that out of the way. I'll probably have to take the battery out and then swing the pump back here, and that'll let me get at the fuel pump. So this is the flange on the surge tank, and it's a little bit crudted up, so I'm going to hit that with a little Scotch-Brite, clean that up a little bit if we need to, maybe file the surface down, get it nice and flat, and then we will put in the new thermostat. There we go, that looks a lot better. Got it flattened out a little bit. Still have some minor pits, but we'll put some sealant on there and she'll seal up just fine. So we put some gasket cement on, put the new thermostat in, and the new gasket. Put the surge tank back in, reattach the power steering pump, got the alternator bracket back on, and now we're getting ready to put the alternator belt on, and then that should be done except for putting fluid in and burping air out of the system.